Good afternoon, Ma'am Garcia. Good afternoon, class. I am Ardaniel Jessamay, the presenter for today. And the topic that I will discuss for today is all about the routines, which is the chapter 3 in our module. Okay, so before we start the discussion about routines, we will have an opening prayer. Can someone in the class who can lead the prayer? Thank you for leading the prayer. And bago ulit tayo magsimula, can I ask someone in the class na magkuha ng screenshots ng ating Google Meet for today and kumuha rin ng ating attendance for today? Okay, thank you. Here is my semi-detailed lesson plan in cell and molecular biology. And the objectives that we have is that after the discussion, me as a presenter will expecting that the listeners or the learners should be able to first define what is protein and its importance, classify the proteins, illustrate the four structures of proteins, enumerate the functions of proteins in our body, and lastly is compare and contrast the biologically complete proteins and the biologically incomplete proteins. Okay, next we will have subject matter. Okay, the topic is proteins. The subtopics are classification, structure, properties, and functions of proteins in our body. Time allotment is 2:30 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. and the reference is here. You can find the details and information that I use in this link, and the materials that I will use and that I use is the Canva presentation, online pictures, laptop, spin the wheel app, Google Form, and Google Meet. Okay, here in procedures, we have the preliminary activities, and that's our daily routine, which we did earlier. The greetings, I did all of you earlier. And we have the opening prayer, and we also have already checked the attendance. In the procedure, we have the lesson proper, which we will having an activity or an icebreaker. So I will ask somebody or a volunteers who will arrange the jumbled letters I present, and they will guess the right words after they arrange the jumbled letters into the right places. After the activity or an icebreaker, we will going to proceed to the presentation. I will going to start the discussion, and I will start it by saying that we are going to learn more about proteins. And then I will ask you class to, if you have any prior knowledge about proteins, and I will ask you or any of you to share your prior knowledge about the proteins in the class. After that, I will start the true discussion by defining the definition of proteins, and of course, during the presentation or discussion, I will going to ask you some questions if you really are listening and if you really understand our lesson. And then after that, I will talk about the related article about proteins, and I will share some good information about it. Next is we will having a activity, which is I will going to have a spin the wheel of name. I will going to spin the wheel which has your name, and then whoever is at the point of the arrow, and he or she will be the one to answer the activity that is present in the screen of your phones. And then this is the evaluation or the quiz that I will going to give you later after the discussion. This is an item of 13 items, but overall score is 20 points. And then also I will give you an assignment, which is to draw the four structures of proteins. Now let's have an icebreaker so we can create an environment which all of the participants in this class will be able to open up and participate in the discussion. So here in the and here the icebreaker, we have jumbled letters where the volunteers or the participants are going to arrange the jumbled letters, and after that he or she will guess the right word. Okay, so let's have the first one. Who wants to volunteer? Okay, let's see if that's correct. Okay, thank you. Next, who wants to volunteer? Thank you. Next, who wants to volunteer? Thank you. Next, who wants to volunteer? Thank you. And next, who wants to volunteer? Thank you. And that's all. Thank you for all the participation. So now let's proceed to the key concepts of the discussion. Okay, here is the key concepts of our discussion for today. So first, we have the proteins are complex organic compounds composed of many amino acids linked together through peptide bonds and cross-linked between chains by sulfhydryl bonds, hydrogen bonds, and van der Waals forces. So there are classification of proteins based on physical properties and chemical composition, structure and solubility, and nutritional properties. And there's also have four structure of proteins, which is the primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and the quaternary structure. And the properties of proteins include the physical and chemical properties. The physical properties includes the shape, smell, color, and etc. While the chemical properties includes the hydrolysis and the reactions of proteins in different agents of chemicals. Okay, so now we are going to learn more about protein. So anyone in the class who have a prior knowledge about what is protein? Anyone? Okay, now let's define what is protein. So here we have the macronutrient necessary for gaining muscular mass. So proteins is a macronutrient that is essential for building our muscle mass. And ano yung pagkakaintindi nyo when it comes to macronutrient? So anyone in the class can explain what is macronutrient? Okay, macronutrient is the nutrients that we use in the largest amounts. These are the nutritive amounts or these are the nutritive components of food that our body needs for energy and for maintaining our body structure and system. So for short, protein is one of our body needs. So we can continue our growth. So now the question is, where do we usually find the proteins? Anyone? Okay, so proteins are usually found or commonly found in the animal products, but it can also be found in other sources such as grains, nuts, legumes, and etc. So next is, proteins were identified as important by many chemists in the early 19th century, including Jöns Jacob Berzelius. So Jöns Jacob Berzelius is a Swedish chemist who in 1838 coined the term protein that comes from the Greek word proteus, which means holding first place or first rank. So kaya siya tinawag na holding first place or first rank because protein is a primary important. So here in slides you can read that proteins are the most abundant kind of molecules in our body. So may mga magsasabi dyan na, oh, hindi naman proteins ang most abundant. Yes, water is most abundant in our body, but proteins are one of the abundant organic molecules in living systems and have the most diverse range of functions of all macromolecules. Another one is that proteins is complex. When we say complex, ibig sabihin nun, proteins is consisting of many different parts and connected parts. And that, tinawag siyang complex because proteins is an organic compounds na binubuo ng napakaraming amino acids na pwedeng mag-range into 2 or thousands of amino acids. And naglalink yun together by peptide bonds and nag-cross-link between chains sa pamamagitan ng sulfhydryl bonds, hydrogen bonds, and van der Waals forces. And also, merong napakalaking pagkakaiba yung chemical composition ng protein kung i-compare in any other group of biologically active compounds. Yung protein, isa siya sa basis ng human and animal tissue cells when it comes to major structural components. So now that we have already defined and I already have explained to you what is the definition of proteins, now let's proceed to the classification of proteins. So proteins is classified into three aspects. So the classification of proteins is classified first on the basis of physical properties and chemical composition. Second is on the basis of structure and solubility. And third is on the basis on nutritional properties. So let me first discuss the classification of properties based on the physical properties and chemical composition. So here we have three types of protein, which is the simple proteins, conjugated proteins, and derived proteins. But let me first discuss the simple proteins. So simple proteins is composed of amino acids on hydrolysis only. And from its own name, simple proteins, it is the simplest proteins. Ito ay binubuo lamang ng amino acids that is joined by peptide bond, and sa hydrolysis, nakakagawa siya ng mixture of amino acids and nothing else. And then yung mga examples niya are pala. So the examples are albumins, globulins, gluteins, albuminoid, histones, and protamins. So here is the example of the products where you can find the albumins. The albumin can be found at the blood, or what we call the proteins that is found in the blood is called seroalbumin. And we can also find albumins in milk, that is called lactalbumin, in a white egg, that is called ovalbumin, in the lentils, which is called legolmilin, in the kidney beans, which is called paseolin, and in the wheat, which is called leucosin. Ito naman yung mga example products na kung saan makikita yung simple proteins na globulins. So, also we can find it in the blood, na tinatawag na serum globulins, in the potatoes, which is called tuberin, in the hemp, which is called edestin, in the mussels, which is called myosin, in the Brazil nut, which is called exelsin, and in the lentils, which is called legumin. And in the gluteins, we can find glutein proteins in the wheat, which is called glutenin, in the rice, which is called orezenin. Okay? And so, yun, binigyan ko kayo ng mga examples, pero hindi ko na bibigyan ng examples yung albuminoid, histones, and protamins kasi masyado nang hahaba yung discussion natin. Pero you can search it naman if you want to know what are the examples of those simple proteins. And before we proceed to the other types of protein, which is the conjugated proteins, let me first explain what is albumins. So yung albumins, ito yung pinaka-most abundant protein in nature, and it is commonly found in seeds in plants, and in blood, and in muscles of animals. And then yung molecular weight nitong albumins ay 65,000 kD or 65,000 daltons. And yung globulin naman ay meron tayong dalawa. Meron tayong pseudoglobin and then euglobulin. Yung pseudoglobulin ay water soluble, while the euglobulin is water insoluble. And they are coagulated by heat. Ibig sabihin, kapag may inat na temperature, na namumuo sila, nagiging solid or semi-solid. So, meron tayong example nun kanina, diba, bloods. So, yun ay namumuo kapag nainitan. And, globulin is also precipitated by lower concentrations of salts, such as ammonium sulfate, o kaya ng sodium sulfate. So, gluteins naman tayo. So, gluteins ay water insoluble. So far doon, for the noises that you hear in my environment, kasi ingay ng mga aso. So, okay, back to the topic. So, gluteins is water insoluble, and they also coagulated by heat. Kapag nainitan, nagiging solid or semi-solid. And they are rich in arginine or arginine, and proline, and glutamic acid. So, next is ito namang albuminoid. Tinatawag rin tong scleroprotein, which is siya yung any of the several fibrous proteins ng cells and tissues na iniisip na pwedeng insoluble sa water, pero kilala siya bilang bilang nakaka-dissolve ng dilute solutions ng acids such as citric and acetic acid. So again, yung albuminoid ay tinatawag na scleroprotein, and isa siya sa mga several fibrous proteins ng cells and tissues na iniisip na isa siyang insoluble in water, pero dissolve siya ng mga dilute solutions katulad ng mga acids na acetic acids and citric acids. Ayun, and next is the histones. So histones are basic protein but weak. Kung ikukumpara siya sa protamine, isa siyang mahinang protein. Yan, basic protein siya and then mahina. So remember this one. And then napakaliit lang ng molecular weight niya, and water soluble siya. So itong histones na to ay mayaman sa basic amino acids, like histidine and arginine, pero deficient siya sa tryptophan, and meron siyang ano, napaka-konti na cysteine and methionine. So, itong histone na to ay hindi siya nagiging solid sa heat. It is not coagulated by heat, and it is present in the nucleic acids as nucleohistone binding with DNA. The last is prolamine. So, prolamine is storage protein na nakikita sa mga buto, and they are water insoluble. Pero, soluble siya sa mga dilute acids, o kaya sa mga detergents, o kaya sa mga 60 to 80% na alcohol. And then, namumuo rin siya by heat, or coagulated by heat. And it is rich in proline and glutamine. And mga example nga pala nito is, hindi ko nga naibigay kanina, is wheat, corn, barley, and oats. Yun, parang mga grains. Okay, so the next classification of proteins based on the physical properties and chemical composition is the conjugated proteins. And these proteins is always linked by the non-protein components or the non-protein substance. So it will become functional. And they are containing or composing of both protein and non-protein components. And the non-protein components is called as prosthetic group. And then these are the examples of conjugated proteins: the nucleoproteins, mucoprotein, glycoprotein, and phosphoprotein. So here is the nucleoprotein. You can find it in the cytoplasm of cells. And the nucleoprotein you can find in the cytoplasm of cells is called ribonucleoprotein. And in the nucleus of chromosomes and ribosomes is called deoxyribonucleoprotein. And you can also find it in the viruses and bacteriophage. And nucleoprotein contains nucleic acids, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And it is present, sabi ko nga kanina, ay you can find it in the chromosomes and in all living forms as a combination of protein with either RNA or DNA. So, yung combination is either protein with DNA or protein with RNA. Next is the mucoprotein. So, you can find it in the saliva, and it is called mucin, and in the egg white, that is called ovomucoid. So, it combines with amino sugar, sugars, acid, and sulfate. So, these are the building blocks of mucus, and which is the protective barrier to the epithelial cells. So it acts as a barrier to most bacteria and pathogens, and it allows uptake of waters, nutrients, and hormones. Next is the glycoprotein. You can find it at the bones, and the glycoprotein you can find in the bones is called osteomucoid, and in the tendons, tendomucoid. Cartilage is called chondromucoid, and it contains more than 4% of hexosamin and mucoproteins. And as its name, glycoprotein, glycogen sugar, and so glycoprotein is simply proteins with sugar attached to it. Okay, so did you know na napakaraming functions ng glycoprotein? So ano nga ba yung mga yon? We have functions in our immune system, like protection in our body, and communication in cells. And last example of conjugated proteins is the phosphoprotein. So phosphoprotein can be found in the milk, and it is called casein. And then in the egg yolk, it is called ovovitelin. And phosphoprotein is phosphoric acid joined in as their linkage to protein. And this phosphoprotein have the phosphatic group, have a phosphate as a prosthetic group. Okay, so the last one for the classification of protein on the basis of physical properties and chemical composition is the derived proteins, which is the proteins that is not naturally occurring proteins, which means that hindi siya napoproduce naturally but is artificially produced protein. And sabi rin dito sa slide is that these derived proteins are simple or is derivatives of either simple or complex protein. Okay, ibig sabihin pwede siyang na-derive sa pamamagitan ng simple or complex proteins. And pwedeng itong derived proteins na to ay nangyari dahil sa action of heat, o kaya dahil sa enzymes, o kaya dahil sa chemicals. And this derived proteins is classified into two classification, which is the primary derived proteins and the secondary derived proteins. So ano muna ba yung primary derived proteins? So primary derived proteins, ito yung proteins which is obtained at the first product or as a first product. Okay, and siya yung first product after the action of acid, enzymes, or water sa protein. Okay, and they are denatured protein. Ibig sabihin, this is yung protein size niya ay hindi nagbabago. Original size lang siya and insoluble in water siya. Ibig sabihin, hindi siya natutunaw sa water. Okay, and then, ano naman ba yung secondary? So, dahil na-classify siya into two, of course, may kaibahan sila. Sabi nga sa primary, it is a derived protein which is a first product, and ibig sabihin yung original size niya is hindi nagbabago, while the secondary derived protein ay yung original size niya ay nagbabago, and nakakaranas doon yung secondary derived protein ng hydrolysis. Okay, and then that results to altering size of protein. Okay, and this secondary derived protein is produced by the action of dilute acid o kaya ng digestive enzymes when the hydrolysis proceeds beyond the level of metaprotein. Okay, kung ang primary derived protein ay insoluble in water, this secondary derived protein is insoluble. Okay, and this is the examples of derived proteins, proteases, peptones, and peptides. One of the example, which is the proteins. So this is the first product of the action of our acids, enzymes, and water, and this is a denatured protein, which means this is the original product of the protein at hindi nagbabago yung original size niya. Okay, and then insoluble in water siya, and this proteins is you can find it in the hem or in the intestine and in the masses, which is the mucin. Next. So, proteases is the intermediate product of protein digestion. Ibig sabihin, this is the finished product or the final product of protein digestion, and it is soluble in water, not coagulated by heat, hindi nagiging solid by heat, or hindi nagiging semi-solid by heat, precipitated by saturated ammonium sulfate, and result from partial digestion of protein sa pamamagitan ng pepsin and trypsin. Okay. Next is peptones. So peptones are the intermediate product of protein digestion, and same properties siya, pareho siya ng properties sa proteases, except sa hindi to nasa-salted out, unlike sa proteases. Kasi unlike sa proteases. So ano ba ibig sabihin pag nasa-salted out? Ibig sabihin para siyang nade-dissolve. Okay? So, itong peptones ay hindi siya nag-dissolve, hindi siya nag-coagulate by heat, hindi siya nagsa-separate, ganyan. And, if you compare it in the proteases, smaller molecular weight siya, meron siyang smaller molecular weight. So the last is peptide. So, it is the intermediate product of protein digestion. Ibig sabihin, ito yung finished product ng protein digestion. And it have 2 or more amino acid joined by a peptide linkage. And it is hydrolyzed to individual amino acid. Ibig sabihin, nag-unbind siya from water to individual amino acids. Okay, now let's proceed to the second classification of proteins that is now based on the structure and solubility. So, in here, we have the 2 classification, which is the globular proteins and the fibrous proteins. So, globular proteins is spherical in shape. So, ibig sabihin, bilog siya. Pag nakita nyo to, para siyang globe, kaya tinawag siyang globular proteins. And it is soluble in water. Highly branched siya. Sanga-sanga siya, ibig sabihin, hindi lang siya straight molecules. And tightly folded in spherical or globular shape. Okay? And you can find globular proteins in the enzymes, in protein hormones, antibodies, hemoglobin, and globulin. Okay, next is the fibrous proteins. So, fibrous proteins is insoluble in water, and from its own word, fibrous proteins, it is in the form of fiber. So, pag fibers, di ba, ano yun? Parang mga tela, parang mga thin threads, ganyan. And it is highly resistant to digestion by proteolytic enzymes, and unbranched siya, unlike globular proteins, it is unbranched, hindi siya sanga-sanga, linear molecules lang siya. And you can find fibrous proteins in collagen of tendons, elastin of connective tissue, fibrin of silk, keratin of silk, actin, and mucin. So, ngayon naman, dito naman tayo sa classification of proteins on the basis of nutritional properties. So, we have 2, which is biologically complete proteins and biologically incomplete proteins. So, biologically incomplete proteins, ito yung merong enough indispensable amino acids. So, yung katawan kasi natin ay nangangailangan ng 20 amino acids. So,
yung 11 amino acids ay kaya namang i-produce ng ating katawan. Kaya, ang kailangan na lang ng ating katawan ay yung 9 remaining amino acids. So, paano natin ma-obtain yung 9 amino acids na kailangan ng katawan natin? So, magagawa natin yun sa pamamagitan ng tamang pagkain ng mga products na mayroong tamang proportion ng proteins. Okay? So, we can found a biologically complete proteins sa eggs, milk, cheese, meat, poultry, and fish. So, yung mga 9 amino acids na kailangan ng katawan natin ay makikita natin din sa mga products na sinabi ko. Next is the biologically incomplete protein. So these are the, may mga proteins naman sila pero hindi sila enough or hindi sila sufficient para makatulong sa katawan natin para mag-replace or mag-build ng new tissue cells. So we can find it in the grains, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. So if kulang ka sa proteins, you should eat not only grains, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. So kailangan kumain din tayo ng either eggs, milk, cheese, meat, poultry, and fish. So, di ba sabi ko kanina, yung sa biologically complete proteins natin, makikita yung mga 9 amino acids na kailangan ng katawan natin. So, ito yung mga amino acids na yon, which is tryptophan, threonine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, and so on and so forth. Now, let's proceed to the structure of protein. So, we have 4 structures of protein, which are primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structures. Let's first have the primary structure. So, the image here na parang small snake siya, pag ganyan siya, di ba? So, it is the primary structure. So, yung mga nakikita nyo na A, S, N, G, L, Y, P, H, E, yan yung mga amino acid that is linked with one another through peptide bonds. And this primary structure is the protein's hierarchy's basic level, okay? And this primary structure is the exact ordering of amino acids na nagpo-form ng chains. So, importante yung exact sequence ng mga proteins kasi napaka-importante yun para sa pag-determine ng final fold and ng function ng proteins. And then, yung sequence ng amino acids na to ay encrypted in the DNA genetic code. And if yung mutation ay present sa DNA and ng amino acid sequence, pwedeng, kapag ang mutation ay present sa DNA, pwedeng magbago yung amino acid sequence and pwedeng maapektuhan yung protein function. So, here in the primary structure, para mas madali na siyang maalala, yung paano yung itsura niya. Parang siyang ahas na may iba't ibang color. O kaya naman, isipin niyo yung Christmas lights na nilalagay sa Christmas tree. Diba pa ganyan-ganyan siya and may iba't ibang color siya. Okay, next is the secondary structure. So, nakalagay dyan sa slide that it refers to the local folded structures that form within a polypeptide due to the interactions between atoms of the backbones. So, itong secondary structure na ito ay pwedeng mag-exist sa dalawang uri ng structures, which is the A-helix and then the depleted sheets structures. So, this structure arises dahil sa regular folding ng backbones ng polypeptide chain dahil sa hydrogen bonding. Okay, however, these segments of the protein chain may acquire their own local fold, which is much simpler and usually takes the shape of spiral. Ganyan, pa ganyan. And these local folds are termed secondary elements and form the protein secondary structure. Okay, yung A-helix na din, isa siya sa most common ways in which a polypeptide chain is forms all possible hydrogen bonds sa pamamagitan ng pag-twist into right-handed screw with the of amine group of each amino acid residue hydrogen bonded to the acidic carboxyl group of the adjacent turn of the helix. Okay, and ito namang depleted sheet is the arrangement of wherein the polypeptide chains are stretched. Nakikita niyo naman parang siyang nag-stretch, and yung mga katabi nila ay nagbaband by intermolecular H bonds. Okay, and in these structures, all peptide chains are stretched out to nearly maximum extension and then laid side by side, which is held together by intermolecular hydrogen bonds. Itong structure na to ay nagre-resembles ng pleated folds of drapery and therefore tinawag siyang depleted sheet. Now ito naman yung tertiary structure, which is the third structure of the proteins. Okay, so this structure arises from further folding of the secondary structure of the protein. So, ang nag-stabilize ng structure na to ay yung H-band, electrostatic forces, disulfide linkage, and van der Waals forces. So, itong tertiary structure ng proteins na to ay nagre-represent ng overall folding ng polypeptide chains. So, further folding of the secondary structure. And it gives rises to two or major molecular shapes called the fibrous and globular, yung diniscuss natin kanina. And then, the main forces which stabilize the secondary and tertiary structures of proteins are the hydrogen bonds, disulfide linkage, and the van der Waals and electrostatic forces of attraction. Okay, so nakikita nyo dito sa tertiary structure yung B sheets and the helix. Okay, makikita nyo yan dyan. So, dito sa pinakamaba yan yung A helixes. And then yung B plated sheets yung banda sa taas. Nakikita nyo diba yung pasibsag, yun yung B sheets. Tapos, itong A helices, ayan yun. Yung paganyan, spiral, okay? And then now, let's proceed to the quaternary structure of protein, which is the last structure. Okay? So, quaternary means fourth, okay? So, it is the arrangement of multiple folded protein or coiling protein molecules in a multi-subunit complex. And napakaraming iba't ibang bonds interaction ang nasa structure na to, including na dyan yung hydrogen bonds, salt bridges, and disulfide bonds. So, yun yung mga bonds na nag-hold sa mga chains ng structures na to. So, these are the overall structure of proteins. Yan, we have primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. So, makikita nyo dyan, parang paano siya ng paano, parami siya ng parami ng mga chains, di ba? From the simple, pag ganyan, sa primary structure, pwedeng dalawahan, pwedeng alpha helix or beta plated sheets. And then tertiary, magkasama na yung dalawa. And then quaternary, ayan, parang buhay-buhay na. Now, let's proceed to the properties of proteins, which is nahahati sa dalawa, which is the physical properties and chemical properties. Okay, so unahin muna natin yung physical properties, which is the color, taste, and then the smell. So, colorless siya, tasteless, and homogeneous. Ano yung homogeneous? Ibig sabihin, same kind lang yung kanilang mga color, taste, and smell, and crystalline siya, and odorless. Walang ano. So, shape and size is simple crystalloid, and spherical, longitudinal. Paano siya? Pabilog. Yan, and molecular weight is between 5 to 103 and 1 to 106. Sorry if ever you hear the bad words na narinig niyo. Sa kapitbahay kasi namin yun. And then, so again, yung shape and size niya is from simple crystalloid spherical structure ay to fibrillar structures. So, two distinct patterns of shape have been recognized in the physical properties of proteins. Okay, and then, which is yung sinabi ko nga kanina na globular and fibrous proteins. And then, yung molecular weight niya is generally meron siyang large molecular weights na nagre-range between 5 to 103 and 1 to 106. And it might be noted that the values of molecular weights of many proteins lie close to the 2 or multiples of 35,000 and 70,000. So, the solubility of proteins is influenced by the pH or what we call or acidity. Okay, solubility is lowest at yung solubility ng proteins na to ay lowest at isoelectric point and nag-i-increase kapag nag-i-increase yung acidity or alkalinity. So, bakit kaya ganon? Kasi kapag yung protein molecules ay nag-exist as either cations or anions, yung repulsive forces between ions are high. And since all the molecules possess excess charges of same sign, thus they will be more soluble than in the isoelectric state. Okay, now let's proceed to the hydrolysis. What is hydrolysis? Can anyone explain to us what is hydrolysis? Okay, hydrolysis is the chemical breakdowns due to the reaction of water. And proteins can be hydrolyzed by a variety of hydrolytic agents, and it can be hydrolyzed by two, which is acidic agents and alkaline agents. And by acidic agents, protein upon hydrolysis with hydrochloride, which is 6 to 12 Newton at 100 to 110 degrees Celsius for 6 to 20 hours ay kaya niyang makabuo ng mga amino acids in the form of hydrochloride. And by alkaline agents, proteins upon hydrolysis can be hydrolyzed with sodium hydroxide. Okay, now let's proceed to the reactions involving carboxyl group or COOH group. And reactions with alkalines, it can form salt formation, nagkakaroon ng salt formation when it comes to alkalines. And then, in alcohols, nagkakaroon ng esterification, which is nakaka-produce ng isang ester product. So here is the reactions involving NH2 group or amide group. So the reactions with mineral acids is there will be going to have a salt formation, and in the formaldehyde there will going to have a hydroxymethyl derivatives that is formed. And ano ba yung hydroxymethyl na yan, na mga derivatives na yan? So it is the biosynthesis groups of amino acids including purines, ayan, etc. and etc. And then in the reaction with benzaldehyde, Skips bases are formed. Ano naman yung Skips bases? These are the compound that is considered subclass of imines or imines, and it is the compounds consisting of carbon, nitrogen, double bond. Okay, so this is the last part of our topic. So we have the important functions of proteins in our body. So we have here 9 important functions of proteins. But let me first discuss the first one, which is the growth and maintenance. So of course, our body needs protein for growth and maintenance. And why is that? Because proteins are the building blocks of life. And proteins have varieties of functions in our body for us to grow and maintain our structures. And the second one is it causes biochemical reactions. So yung mga enzymes, these are the proteins that aids the thousands of biochemical reactions that takes place within and outside our cells. The structure of enzymes allow them to combine with other molecules inside the cell called substrates, which catalyze reactions that are essential to our metabolism. And then third is it acts as a messenger. So some proteins are hormones, which are chemical messengers that aid communication between our cells, tissues, and organs. Yeah, number 4 is provides a structure. So some proteins are fibrous and provide cells and tissues with stiffness and rigidity. So these proteins include keratin, collagen, and elastin, which helps connective framework and certain structures in our body. Yung keratin, ito yung nagbibigay, ito yung structural proteins na nakikita sa ating hair, sa ating nails, and sa iba pang part ng ating katawan. And then, number 5 is maintains proper pH or acidity. So, proteins plays a vital role in regulating the concentration of acids and bases in our blood and other bodily fluids. Number 6 is it balances fluids. So, yung protein, siya yung nagre-regulate ng body processes natin para ma-maintain natin yung ating fluid balance. And yung albumin and then yung globulin, ito yung mga proteins na nasa ating katawan na tumutulong para ma-maintain natin yung body fluids natin. Para ma-maintain natin yung balance ng body fluids natin sa pamamagitan ng pag-attract at pag-retain ng water. And kung hindi naman natin, kapag hindi tayo nakakain ng enough protein, yung level ng albumins natin and globulins natin ay nagdi-decrease. Consequently, those proteins can no longer keep blood in our vessels, and the fluid is forced into the spaces between our cells. So as the fluids continues to build up in the spaces between our cells, swelling or edema occurs particularly in the region of our stomach. So, yun. So, kapag ganun yung nangyari, makakabuo tayo ng tinatawag na sakit. So, ang tawag doon ay severe protein malnutrition na tinatawag na kwashiorkor. So, nade-develop siya when a person is developing enough calories but does not consume enough protein. So, napakahalaga talaga ng protein sa ating body. And then, 7 is bolster immune system. So, proteins helps from immunoglobulin antibodies to fight infection. So, antibodies are proteins. Yung mga antibodies natin, these are proteins na nasa ating blood na tumutulong para protektahan tayo sa mga harmful invaders katulad ng bacteria and pathogens. So, when kapag yung mga foreign invaders na to ay pumasok sa ating cells, yung body natin ay nagpo-produce ng antibodies. So, na-eliminate yung mga pumapasok na foreign invaders na yon, and napoprotektahan tayo sa mga sakit. And without these antibodies, yung bacteria and viruses
ay kayang-kaya na mag-multiply sa ating katawan and makakabuo ng disease na nagagawa dahil sa mga bacteria and viruses na pumapasok sa ating katawan. And then 8 is it transports and stores nutrients. So transport proteins are carrying substances throughout our bloodstream. So So, 8 is transports and stores nutrients. So, meron tayong tinatawag na transport proteins, which carry substances throughout our bloodstream into cells, out of cells, or within our cells. So, the substances transported by those proteins include nutrients like vitamins, minerals, blood sugar, cholesterol, and oxygen. So, mga example niyan is yung hemoglobin. So, yung hemoglobin is protein siya na nagdadala ng oxygen from your lungs to your body tissues. And then yung glucose transporters, ito yung nagmo-move ng glucose to your cells. And then yung lipoproteins, nagta-transport siya ng cholesterol and other fats in your blood. So that's all for the topic of our proteins. Let's now proceed to the chosen related article about proteins. The related article that I choose about proteins is entitled Proteins that Predicts Dementia, Alzheimer's Risk Identified. And it is published on May 17, 2021. And you can read it on ScienceDaily.com. You can just click the link here. And the source is Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School of Public Health. And this article talks about the proteins that predicts the future dementia that may help lead to treatments and preventions of dementia. Here is the summary of the article. And so many people have suffered Alzheimer's disease, and it is a reversible fatal condition that leads to loss of cognitive and physical functions. And despite of intensive study, there's still no treatments that can slow the process of the disease or stop or even reverse it. So, scientists have widely assumed that the best time to treat dementia is before dementia symptoms develop. So, ang sabi nga sa quotes is, prevention is better than cure. So, because of that, many scientists have studied and they took blood, they studied the blood, they study the blood of the middle-aged people and the old-age people, mga 60 years old, ganyan. And, kumuha sila ng mga dugo, sa dugo ng mga tao na middle-age and old-age, noong dugo nila noong 1993 and 1995, and kumuha rin sila ng dugo noong 2002 and 2006 and 2011 to 2013. So, those bloods were studied, and meron silang nakita na proteins that is significantly associated with Alzheimer's risk. So, noong 1993 to 1995, yung mga bloods na napag-aralan nila doon, ay may nakita silang 16 proteins. And sa 2011 to 2013, may nakita silang 13 proteins, and ganun din sa 2002 to 2006. So, the researchers analyzed the results and found 38 proteins whose abnormal level and were significantly associated with Alzheimer's risk of developing dementia, and napipredict to 5 years on the following blood draws. So, ang ginamit nila na technique to test the blood is soma scan, nagme-measure to ng mga protein levels. And yung proteins na found na nakita nila sa mga bloods na significantly associated with Alzheimer's risk ay tinatawag na SVEP1 or SVEP1. Ang tawag dito ay polydom, and it is a protein whose normal functions remain somewhat mysterious, pero pinag-aralan nila, and they found that it was linked to the thickened artery conditions, atherosclerosis, which underlies heart attack and strokes. So yun, so in this article, they found out that there's protein in our body that can predict if we are going to have a dementia in the future, and that proteins can predict the the risk of Alzheimer's in 2 decades advance. So, napakaganda ng study na ginawa nila dito. So, now, we are already done. We're going to have a short activity. I have here a spin the wheel. So, in here you have your names, and whoever is in the arrow will be the one to answer the questions or the activity. Okay. So let's first have this one. So in this activity, you're just going to say what is protein structure is this. So this is the first one. So let's have the spin the wheel. Okay. Okay, next. And in this activity, we're just going to give the function of proteins in our body. So let's have the spin the wheel. Now, define simply and briefly what is protein. And this is give the 3 classification of proteins on the basis of physical properties and chemical composition. Next is give the 2 classification of proteins on the basis of structure and solubility. And give the 2 classification of proteins on the basis of nutritional properties. That's all. Thank you for participation. You did really well. And this is our quiz. The quiz will be sent in our G classroom, and these are multiple choices and enumeration. So, yung mga sagot is capital letters. And take note that any technical errors in the Google form will be double checked, but small letter answers is automatically wrong. So, let's kailangan nating sumunod sa mga direction. No? So, the assignment is to draw the 4 structures of protein, and you will going to submit it to the Google Drive folder that I will send in the G-class or in our group chat later. And here is the references of the discussion. Thank you for listening and participation.